What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at The Wrestler, directed by Aaron Aronofsky, starring Mickey Rourke. Now, The Wrestler tells the story of Randy the Ram Robinson, who was a very popular 80s wrestler who now, after years of abuse on his body, is now clinging on to whatever name recognition and then value he has now as a performer. So, pretty much The Wrestler is a character study on how the wrestling business pretty much chews you up and spits you out. Now, as somebody who grew up watching and loving professional wrestling, and even now that I'm 30, I still watch and love professional wrestling, even though the majority of wrestling now is not even close to what it used to be back when I was growing up in the 90s. The Wrestler is a dark interpretation of just the evil of pro wrestling. Now, The Wrestler pretty much takes a lot of influence from the Beyond the Mat documentary from 1999, and if you remember that documentary, a good chunk of it focused on Jake the Snake Roberts and pretty much his crumbling personal life, and how pretty much the only thing that keeps him going is just wrestling. And The Wrestler kind of takes influence from that segment of Beyond the Mat, and I'm going to say this. As a movie, I think The Wrestler is great. This is a great movie. Mickey Rourke as Randy the Ram Robinson puts on an Oscar-worthy performance. He is excellent in this movie, and I give Mickey Rourke a lot of credit. You know, he took the time to actually train and learn the ropes and learn the professional wrestling business. He got himself into really, really good shape. And when you watch the movie, he handles himself like a true professional wrestler when he's in the ring. He looks fluid and now, obviously it's a movie, so they're using editing and camera cuts. But he looks good while wrestling. He looks like he looks like a legit performer. You know, this movie could play out as like an autobiography of Randy the Ram Robinson if Randy the Ram Robinson was a real wrestler. Instead, he's an amalgamation of a bunch of different wrestlers all into one. But the portrayal of Mickey Rourke as Randy the Ram is great, and I like his interactions with a lot of the other actors. You know, I like this budding romance that takes place with him and Marissa Tomei, who plays this character of Cassidy, who is a stripper. And I also like how Cassidy and Ram, their characters, they kind of parallel one another's, because at the end of the day, they're both playing fictionalized versions of themselves. Randy the Ram Robinson is a fictionalized version of Randy the real person. Cassidy is a fictionalized, though very erotic version of who Pam the real person is. So kind of like how those two characters parallel with themselves, them having to go into a different persona in order to make a living. So I like how the movie parallels that. It's really good stuff. Another thing that I like is I like the eroding relationship between Randy the Ram and his daughter Stephanie, and this relationship this parallels the Jake Roberts segment from Beyond the Mat. In Beyond the Mat, we see that Jake Roberts has a very distant, eroding relationship with his daughter. In this movie, Randy the Ram has a distant, eroding relationship with his daughter Stephanie. Now, the movie tries to build up their relationship, and it teases that maybe Randy and Stephanie are gonna have a reconciliation, until Randy decides to get fucked up at a bar and he misses a dinner date, which officially kills any point of reconciliation or any chance of these two actually having a father-daughter relationship. Now, listen, for drama, it's good. It plays into the tragedy of who Randy the Ram is, as this former 80 star still trying to cling on to whatever fame that he's got. He's pretty much losing everything around him. He's lost his daughter. He can't have a relationship with the woman he wants to be with. He's working in a supermarket. As somebody who works at a supermarket himself, the supermarket culture is not anything special. The pay sucks, and you got to deal with assholes. And that's what Randy the Ram Robinson does for a day job. He has to work in a supermarket just to make some extra income. But when he's a professional wrestler, he's loved. He is respected by the boys. He's respected by the fans. In real life, nobody cares about him. He's a nobody. They do whatever they can to just undermine him, and I like seeing that. I like seeing how Randy, the person, is. Oh, I'm sorry. How Robin Ramzinski and Randy the Ram Robinson, they're two different personalities. They're two different types. They're two different personalities of the same person, and I like all that. And I like that Randy Robinson has to struggle with the fact that, listen, while he was doing a match, a death match, he suffered a heart attack at the end of the end of said match. And if he were to wrestle one more match, he would have a heart attack. And it just so happens at the end of the movie sees Randy the Ram having one more match against the Ayatollah, who who throughout the course of the movie is known that this was Randy's biggest opponent back in the 80s, and they drew a sold out crowd at Madison Square Garden. And now they're doing the big rematch 20 years later. Which this also happens to be Randy's final match, because the movie implies that Randy, pretty much suffers a heart attack after he jumps off the rope to do his patented finishing the move, the Ram Jam. So, like I said, in terms of a depiction of a one-sided professional wrestling, I think this movie did a good job at seeing just what professional wrestling can do to one person. Your family life is distant. You're hanging on to whatever fame you have left, to the point where you're doing these conventions that have a handful of people attend, and then when he looks around him, he sees a lot of his a lot of his comrades who are just disabled. And it's a really depressing scene, the autograph session, the convention scene is really, really depressing scene, seeing that. But a lot of the fun scenes over in Randy as Randy's in the ring and you see him wrestle. Like, you see him wrestle these guys like like the character called Tommy Rotten. We see him wrestle the Necro Butcher, which is the death match that gives Randy the Ram his heart attack after he wrestles it. So, in terms of like how the action is in this ring, I think Darren Aronofsky did a really great visceral job at just showing you, just at showing the wrestling matches themselves. I think that was great. That was good stuff. So, from a story standpoint, I think this movie is great. Though my criticism is that now this is where my criticism is going to be, because The Wrestler is a movie that Dark Side of the Ring would present as a very special episode of. Dark Side of the Ring presents a movie presentation. That's what The Wrestler is. It's like watching Dark Side of the Ring. It's just this gloomy, depressing, just dark movie. It's not uplifting. It's not heartwarming. It's just depressing. It's just depressing to know that that people are going to look at wrestling as just this thing that eats you up and chews you out, which, to a lot of the boys it has done over the years. But there are also a lot of wrestlers from the 80s who are still alive today and who have gotten their lives on track and now are in the best place both mentally and physically, i.e. Jake the Snake Roberts. As of present day, Jake Roberts, I've never seen Jake Roberts look any better. He's in a good place in his life. He's in AEW, and I like all that. And I like where Jake Roberts is as a person in real life. And like I said, like I keep mentioning in this review, Jake Roberts is the overall template of Randy the Ram Robinson. But where Jake Roberts begins, Randy kind of ends, because pretty much Randy goes down the trajectory of what the old Jake Roberts went down to the point where, yeah, Jake Roberts would have died if he did not turn his life around. And of course, being that Randy had such a hard time just assimilating to a normal life, the only place where he felt real to himself and to where he felt welcomed was in a professional wrestling ring. And that's where the depressingness of this movie comes from. It pretty much tells you that the glam and the glitz is where a lot of these professional wrestlers feel the most alive. But when you take them out of that, it's almost as if they're a fish out of water and that they're alien to everyone else. And I don't like that depiction of the wrestling business and a lot of the wrestlers, because not every single wrestler is like that. A lot of wrestlers, they can turn off their characters and live a normal life. This movie, it kind of presents it in a one-sided affair, and I'm not a huge fan of that at all. Not a huge fan of that at all. But like I said, as a movie, technically, this is a dark, gritty movie. I thought Darren Aronofsky did a fantastic job bringing this movie to life. the story, like I said, is very depressing, but it's also very interesting. The performances all the way around are rock solid, and the choreography of the wrestling matches, they all look authentic and real. Even though, yeah, liberties are taken. Then again, this is a movie, so you have to take liberties in order to tell your story. So, pretty much those are my thoughts on The Wrestler. Overall, I'm going to give this movie a solid 8 out of 10. I highly recommend this movie. I think this movie is really, really good. Though, when you actually compare it to real wrestling and what real wrestlers went through, it's a gross. It's a. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say it's a gross misrepresentation of the wrestling business, and it focuses solely on the dark side and not enough of the positive side. And that's my biggest gripe with this movie, is that it kind of paints wrestling in a bad light. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.